Welcome to the Contagious Code podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today, my guest is Alex Moldovan, the founder of JS Heroes. JS Heroes is a conference in Romania that is fully transparent and celebrates JavaScript. By fully transparent, we mean that they publish literally everything. All their costs, all their money, all their ticket sales, everything is transparent and open source. I believe that's at jsheroes.io/transparency. They are sustainable, and they've been Europe's premier JavaScript conference for a long time. In fact, a lot of conferences, because of the economy, are closing down and recommending that people who want to attend JavaScript conferences in Europe go to JS Heroes. They also care a lot about fairness and equity, and in our discussion, we go into the details of what it takes to run all of that. A conference in and around JavaScript that has a great diverse representation of speakers and attendees alike, that compensates speakers for their efforts, and that is transparent about every single thing end to end. We also talk through some engineering topics because Alex is an engineer at CodeSandbox, which some of you may have used. If you've ever been to a tech conference, if you want to speak at one, or if you're a company thinking about going to one, maybe sponsoring one, if you're thinking about JavaScript conferences in Europe at all, then this episode is for you, either about how to run them, or should I attend them, should I speak at them, or more. Now, I'd like to offer this to all of us at zero cost, and this is very much separate to my day job. And the way you can do that is through partners and sponsors. Let's take a moment to thank them. The Contagious Code podcast is partnered with SquiggleConf. SquiggleConf is happening in October in Boston in the Aquarium, and the Contagious Code podcast is happy about it, and we're giving away one free ticket for SquiggleConf if you share this episode on social media and say you'd like to attend SquiggleConf. SquiggleConf is a conference about developer tools, TypeScript, ESLint, etc. It's put on by a former guest on the podcast, Josh Goldberg, and honestly a dear friend, and I think you should attend. The Contagious Code podcast is also sponsored by Code Crafters. Code Crafters is a website and an app that teaches you about how to code, just like I do. So what they do is they have you pick a programming language you either know or want to get better at, like TypeScript or Rust. And they have you pick a developer tool that we use, like Docker or Git or Redis or something like this. And then they teach you how to implement those tools from scratch in the language that you choose. By doing this, you get better at the tool, but also the language in sort of a twofold learning approach. They have a generous free tier, but should you start paying, you can get 40% off using the link in the show notes. That's tej.as/codecrafters. The Contagious Code podcast is also partnered with That Conference. That Conference is a multidisciplinary family-style conference that happens twice a year in the United States, once in Wisconsin and once in Texas. There's many tracks, lots of content from some of the best speakers in the world. If you'd like to attend, we give away a free ticket. Just share this episode on social media, say you'd like to enter a raffle to do so, and you will. Thanks for sticking around. And now for my discussion with Alex Moldovan. Alex, such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about conference organization, and not just any conference, but JS Heroes, which has the reputation. You know, I spoke at it this year, but I've been recommended to speak at it for many years. I think like 2 or 3 years now, because of the reputation it has. It's this community-driven, nonprofit conference that really is quite altruistic in its apparent motivation and so on. So I'm excited to talk about this, but before we do that, could you maybe give a little bit of an introduction, yourself, what led to JS Heroes and so on for the listeners, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm first and foremost, I'm a software developer. I've been in tech for 15 years now. It's always hard to count back. Once you're over 10 years, it feels like it. You have to, it gets a bit harder to calculate, but yeah, I've been in tech for a bunch of years, and I've been very involved in events even before JS Heroes. Like even back when I was I would say junior mid developer, I had this kind of curiosity of, you work on your project and you're like, okay, can I know what is outside of my project? Like, can I meet other people from other projects? So I kind of always had this kind of curiosity in my back. But just to wrap it up on my my introduction, yeah, I currently work as a product engineer at CodeSandbox. But I guess most of the people do know me from my work with the JS Heroes, which I will get into in a second. Um, how we got to JS Heroes is, or how I personally first got into events and conferences, is kind of this context of, being working in a bigger company and wanting to know more about, other technologies, maybe what other people are using on their projects. Because most of the times you work in a bubble, right? At most, you know about your immediate project, your colleagues, what are they working on. You get your technology insights from that small little context. So even I think back in 2012 or 2011, I started kind of picking brains of other colleagues, started gathering people at work very informally, like let's have like an internal company meetup. And then, started talking with people outside of the company, and I realized other companies are doing the same. So we started saying, okay, let's do this. It kind of grew from like the circle kept evolving, right? From the immediate project team, then the company, then, the whole city, the community, and starting to have these, these local meetups. And yeah, this ultimately led to the question, like, what happens if we organize an event? Like, can we do something like, we were seeing these models across Europe, especially with conferences that have been organized for a while, like Nordic JS, like JSConf EU, JSConf Budapest, all these, conferences where you were seeing a lot of speakers, well-known speakers coming into the community, sharing their ideas, and the community benefiting a lot from that. And as a contrast, back where I'm from home, in Cluj, Romania, it wasn't like that. It was like maybe at most you get one or two people from outside at the conference, from the international community, and the rest is just local. So we said, okay, let's try something. Like let's figure out if something like this can be organized in Cluj. So it all started kind of like very from within the community. It wasn't like any sort of like visionary idea of we need to achieve this, or any very like grand project of a certain company. It was just very organic from the beginning.
It was more, I feel like I'm in a bubble. I want to break this bubble. I want to invite external views.
My analogy to this is kind of like your community is, and maybe I'm rushing a bit with this. So basically, like just to give it a bit more of a broader context, JS Heroes is not just the conference that we organize once a year. JS Heroes is basically the local group of JavaScript and web developers from Cluj, Romania, where I'm based. And we organize meetups, we organize boot camps, and we organize the conference. And the conference, of course, being the most visual, like the most powerful thing visually, like that kind of takes center stage. But so to backtrack on that, the community is here, 12 months a year, 365 days, right? And we are in this bubble. And once a year, when the conference happens, we kind of open that bubble and we invite people from outside, and not just speakers, right? Also attendees. It's kind of like you're connecting yourself to the network of like the intelligence, the super intelligence of the bigger group of engineers and developers from whatever countries you get here, plus all the speakers that are coming from all over the world. And it's kind of like you get all that information, so to say, you get all that intelligence in the community during the event. So that's for me. That always was that kind of like the analogy of how I was thinking about a community event.
Right. It's I didn't know that. Thank you for clarifying that. JS Heroes is so much bigger than just the conference, and that it happens every day of the year in some capacity. How many events would you say happen per year, in terms of like meetups and workshops and hackathons?
It varies a lot. Now we are trying to kind of solidify around one meetup per month. We found that that's the right kind of cadence for this. We also tried to alternatively, like in the 6 months from JS Hero, so that we have enough of a gap, we tried to organize these boot camps. Started on the model of Node School, if you're familiar with that. And we just took it and made it more of a bootcamp experience for, first time, people seeing code for the first time, or trying JavaScript for the first time, or HTML, CSS and stuff like that, or React. We did that in the past. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say we're always in. I wouldn't say we're always doing the same cadence. It goes up and down, but we try to, as much as we can, we try to be, in this, 12 meetups per year, one conference, hopefully one extra activity like a workshop, bootcamp style event.
That's so cool. That reminds me of my friend Piotr Gentara. He runs Warsaw JS, and they do a similar thing. They do a meetup every month and a conference once a year. Their conference is a bit small, but like it's Warsaw. The community is small. And so I think there's so much value in bringing external speakers to smaller communities, because that's how they grow, right? Would you agree? Like, what has the growth trajectory been for this community since you started doing these events and inviting the external speakers?
So yeah, just to clarify, we for the meetups we usually have internal speakers like from the community. Once in a while we do have external ones. We do have speakers, for example, from other cities in Romania once in a while. But and maybe we will talk more about like the non-profit model behind JS Heroes a bit later. But because of the budgetary constraints, we can't really invite speakers from outside. We can't provide for them like transportation and accommodation for the meetup. But the growth has been there. That's for sure. What I found interesting in the past years was how the pandemic affected that. We were doing a bunch of events pre-pandemic, and you would normally get, let's say, 10, 20 people, 30 people, maybe 40 people. 40 people was already considered like a big success for a meetup. Then we had the pandemic, and we tried a bit like online meetups. Didn't really work. It didn't feel like it's the right format for us. We just stopped. We say, okay, when the time is better, we will come back. When we started doing events again in 2022 in the fall, we started seeing this spike of interest. And now we get, if we announce a meetup, we get it full with 60, 70, maybe 80 people in 1 or 2 days. And It kind of, basically it doubled. The interest, at least in the meetups, doubled. And I guess that's partially because a lot of people are now finding meetups the point where they go and socialize and they meet new people, and they take they take that energy that they would normally get from an office. Maybe they don't work in an office anymore. But I also see a lot of interest from different people of different experience levels. In the past, maybe you would get more. It felt like meetups were more aimed at junior developers, and now it feels like it's a very broad, it's a broad level of experience where you get a lot of people that have been in tech for 20 years and they share their experiences, and a lot of people take it's a great way to it's a great way to share all of these bits of knowledge throughout the community.
Totally. When I can't say after COVID, because some will say it's not fully over, but as it was starting to decrease in terms of risk, the React Berlin meetup started again. And man, the room was full beyond capacity. Literally, there were people lining up outside for hundreds of meters trying to get in here. So all that to say, I see and agree with your experience. It's just absolutely bananas how much people realized they need meetups in the middle of COVID, and it was really beautiful for me to see. And so it presents some credibility to the idea that in-person events are not going away. I would hope so. And we'll talk about in-person events going away in a little bit. Okay, let's dive into. So JS Heroes is somewhat unique in the way that it's nonprofit and fully community organized. As you mentioned, it's a bunch of software developers who were like, look, we need to do something for the local community. We maybe need to get some external speakers. Let's put on a conference once a year, but let's do more stuff. The more traditional events, I'm thinking of things like We Are Developers or InfoWeb Shift or whatever. These are backed by large companies. They're typically for profit. There's a whole business side to them. How does that approach impact the way you plan and execute the conference in contrast to that?
I don't want to antagonize conferences that are doing it for profit, because it's a very, it's a business and it's totally understandable. But I'm not saying this because they're doing in a bad way and we're doing it in the right way. I'm just saying that when we started, we looked at how a for-profit conference was organized, and we tried to make things that we saw were kind of core to the for-profit idea just the opposite way. So if a conference if conference is for profit, for example, put the sponsors first, like they're on the stage first, right? Like, everything is around the sponsors, and you have sponsor booths and you have speakers that are coming in from the sponsor companies. We said no to that. Like, that was the ground rule for when we started. If a for-profit company, for-profit conference would have 5 tracks, because they have to satisfy multiple sponsors and they have to have a lot of speakers to get more numbers, get more people, and attract more. It's kind of like again, and I'm not saying that that's the bad way of doing it. It's just those are when you do it for profit, you have your objective. It has to be tied somewhere to the monetary aspect. You can do a bunch of great things, and I've been to a lot of conferences that are for profit and are doing a great job. But because we didn't have a model for a nonprofit conference, we just looked at that and did the opposite, so to say. So, single track, full focus on the single stage, full focus on the speakers, on the speaker experience, trying to make sure that people are welcome in the country, that they feel that they are, in a way, part of the community from when they arrive at the conference. And it kind of turned into like this. I have the kind of small little obsession of like, you have to maximize the speaker experience, because when you're doing this with a small budget, you can't really go on and broadcast to the whole world that you're doing an event and everyone will hear about it and everyone will come. You have to have your very good ambassadors that are taking the message further. Like, you heard about JS Heroes before coming to the conference. And that, for me, that's a success, because it means that the people that have been here, the speakers that have been here before, have taken the message further. And whenever there's a conversation about a conference that they enjoyed, maybe they say they really like JS Heroes. So that's a great success for us, because it's free advertising, so to say.
Yeah. I, if you want, I can even tell you specifically what they told me, and it's just so cool. And for those listening, I think this is worth mentioning. By the way, we're having it would be comfortable for the listeners, Alex, if when you're not speaking, if you just mute your microphone right there, because it like amplifies quietness when you're not speaking. So if you thank you. What the ambassadors have mentioned to me was that it's community driven, it's nonprofit, but also it's a very welcoming place. And I think one big thing that some ambassadors, I won't name who, highly emphasized was the fact that JS Heroes pays speakers. I think a lot of listeners don't know this, but most conferences do not pay an honorarium to speakers. Most, like, I'm talking specifically about JavaScript and web conferences. And so, when you mention we're not doing sponsored talks, we're not highlighting sponsors, but we're actually trying to optimize for the feeling of community, like rewarding effort, right? That is, speakers do quite a bit of work preparing a presentation and giving the presentation and then freaking out about slides the day before. So rewarding that effort is a real way of showing that they're welcome in the community. And I will say this, I did feel like I was part of the Cluj community, because you also had folks from Bucharest and all over Romania, right? So that is extremely clear. Also, you mentioned the single track approach. Can we speak to that a little bit? Is in the case that this was for profit, would there be sort of a temptation to turn it into a multi-track event so then you can sell more tickets because people have more choices, etc.?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way. There are a lot of for-profit conferences that are single track. I guess the single track, multi-track thing is more about if you as an organizer or as a person who builds the agenda together with the group, we have a group of people that work on the CFP and then we build the agenda together. Do you want to take responsibility for creating that agenda for people that, basically instead of letting your audience choose between talk A and talk B, you say, no, I'm actually choosing the specific talk that I want you to see, and just trust me because I have the experience on this. It sounds a bit like maybe patronizing. It's not intended that way. It's just we have been to a lot of events individually. Most of us that are doing the agendas, we have seen what works and what doesn't work, and we know maybe we talk a lot throughout the year. We put really a lot of effort on trying to understand what's the current state of the community in 2023, 2024, 2025, and so on. What is of interest to people, and which are the talks that will maximize the advantage that people gain after the conference, right? They pay a ticket, they need to feel at the end of the event that they got something back, right? And my personal experience with multi-track events is just running from one place to another, trying to figure out which one is the talk that I would probably enjoy most, and just ending up not going to any of them because your brain gets drained very fast just because of that cognitive overload of having to think whether this talk is better than that one, or should I go with here because my friends are going there, and it's the whole shenanigans around choosing what to see.
That's so cool. That's like giving a curated experience to your people who have bought a ticket. So it's also this additional layer of service to your attendees. It's like, look, we're not going to overwhelm you with choice, but we're going to actually pick for you and limit your choice because we, like you said, right? Trust me, we know what's best because we've been around and we've really taken care. My fellow speaker at JS Heroes this year, David Khurshid, said it so beautifully because we go back about 5 years, David and I, and we also prefer the single track. And he said it's like going to a restaurant where there's like 300 things on the menu versus going to a restaurant where there's 3 things on the menu. And these are carefully selected by the head chef. Which one do you prefer, right? I think we've all been to places where there's a burger and pizza and shawarma and curry on the menu. And you go like, yeah, but if they're doing all of this, can it really be good? And there's reasons why Michelin star restaurants and places that charge you like $500 a plate will give you just like 3 things because these are 3 things that they've practiced and they're aware. Does that analogy track? David said this, and to me, this makes a lot of sense, but I'm curious if you feel similar. It sounds like you do.
Yeah, I do. And furthermore, what happens when you have a single track is that you can, and again, maybe this sounds a bit over-engineered. We do like to make things this way, but we arrange the talks in such a way that they make sense for you. It's kind of like I keep telling people that we're writing a story for you, right? You come to the event, you see maybe like some opening talks. The first part of the day is maybe jumping into some technical aspects. If you have talks about, let's say web standards, they are grouped together in a single session and they just make sense one after another. I remember distinctively in 2023, we had 3 talks, super interesting, super technical, one after another. And the speakers did a great job of referencing back to the previous speaker. And it just felt like everyone was coming to us after that block was like, how did you plan for this? And we were like, we were lucky because the speakers were very good and they were able to reference back to those talks before them. But we are also hoping that would happen. So it's kind of like we're planting the seed for a potential kind of how should I call it?
Narrative.
Like a narrative, yeah, or ideas leaking from one talk to another and telling like a, writing this through line of the whole event. It doesn't always happen, of course, because you cannot force this. You cannot go to speakers and say, hey, you better reference that, or else you're not coming, or anything like that. But we're just creating this context that favors this kind of narrative, as you said. It's a very good word.
That is so cool. I wonder how this lines up with like human biology and the way our brains and bodies work, right? Because like it's well known that we are more alert and equipped to do analytical, sort of like very, cognitively demanding tasks early in the day, in the morning time. But later in the day, like around sunset or just before, we tend to be more creative. We tend to be more I'm just going to paint something, or I want to make dinner. For a lot of people, making dinner is the sort of like creative exercise because the analytical side has been sort of finished for the day. I wonder if there's something there for arranging a schedule. You know what I mean? You mentioned this already. Like you probably do like some technical stuff in the beginning.
Yeah, like definitely before launch, every time we look at all our talks once we have settled on the speakers we invite, once we have gotten the list of speakers that we picked from the CFP, like we have a mix of half and half, from there. Once we look at all these talks, and we maybe, especially for speakers that we maybe don't know so well, or maybe we don't know, maybe their talk details are a bit more abstract, we do like a call with them to just further analyze what their angle is and how technical it gets and how inspirational it gets and all that. Once we have that, we kind of arrange making sure that the second session of the day, like before lunch, after the first coffee break, but before lunch, when your brain is at the most active, that's where you get your talks about in-depth stuff on some technical aspects. Towards the end of the day, we try to wrap it up with either some creative coding or something that looks forwards, towards what future technologies might be about, or tries to wrap up. We also had something similar one year when the last speaker gave a great talk, kind of wrapping up the current state of the ecosystem based on all the talks that were happening throughout the day. So, yeah.
That is so cool. I think this is actually the superpower from all the good feedback I hear about JS Heroes, because there's so much evidence. I think of this one study, and we'll put a link to this in the show notes, where they were studying the power of story. And you mentioned you try to do this with your agenda, do a narrative style, where there is an opportunity for every subsequent talk to reference to a previous talk. In this experiment, what they did was they put people across geography, so various different cities and so on, and they had them all watch the same movie at the same time. And what they found after, so they recorded their heart rates and stuff, and they plotted them on a time series graph and put them on transparent paper and sort of overlaid them together. And what they saw was everyone's heartbeat was in sync, even though these people never met, when they were like witnessing the same narrative. And I think, that's literally the definition of feeling together, feeling togetherness, feeling like a community. And since so much effort goes into this narrative thing, and your agenda, I think maybe we don't know that this is why we feel so connected, but I think that's why we feel so connected, because we're all watching the same thing, and the same thing is organized with our own like internal rhythms. This is so cool. I love this intersection of biology and just conference organization.
Yeah. Plus, people will have a baseline to discuss in the breaks, right? Because everyone witnessed the same thing. When you go to when you're having a multi-track event, people meet in the break, and you can describe the talk that you saw maybe in a couple of words, but the feeling won't be the same if you're not really. I feel like it's a much more valuable conversation to go to someone and just try to dissect what you just listened together, right? And try to understand different angles of the talk that you just saw together, as opposed to just describing to the other person what that talk was about, when they have no context or no idea.
Yeah, I also learned a lot in the breaks, because I spent some time in the breaks pair programming with people. For example, with David, he was showing me his framework for AI agents, and I noticed this happening quite a lot. Like in the breaks, people, because they were so inspired by the single track, they would often just, like you said, instead of like introducing the other tracks, talk to their friend, they just talk about the same thing, and they go way deeper because they witnessed the same thing. I think that's so cool. I'd love to talk a little bit about transparency. JS Heroes is the most transparent conference I have ever seen, ever. And so, the last year was very difficult in terms of the economy. And a lot of conference organizers that I know have expressed like a lamentation about this, right? Like, oh my goodness, we're going bankrupt. Nobody's sponsoring the conference. It's a very difficult season. And I empathize and sympathize with all of that. However, when it comes to talking about like actual numbers, the best you'll get is like, oh yeah, we're in the negative, we're in debt, or something like that. But there's no numbers. There's words. With JS Heroes, you publish like detailed financial information. We'll put links to that in the show notes. Can you walk us through the decision making process that led to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it kind of started like that. It didn't start in a opaque way and then it just opened at some point. We had this idea at first because first the first group of people that organized back in 2017, the first event, we were all coming from different companies in the local community here, and we all had this idea that we all respected the idea of open source, and we had our values aligned behind open source software. So then we said, okay, how do you translate open source values into organizing events? And how you translate it first and foremost is by being open about all the details around this. So, okay, you have a budget, let's make that public so that, there's no need to hide anything about how much money is required to organize this. We have a costs, and then certain costs, and then the costs are split by, there's travel, there's, food and catering and all that. There are other activities. We can also publish that. So from the first edition, we had this idea of a transparency report where after each event, we just publish exactly how much money went in, how much money went out, some breakdown of the costs, and of course, plus, minus, and what you get in the end. Because we also wanted to stay true to the idea of really being non-profit, not just hiding behind something that's called non-profit, but at the end of the day, make some money and we actually take some of that money. Like no one that works for the conference, takes money out of this. Everyone is kind of volunteering their time and energy. And I don't see us moving into a different direction. I feel like that's our recipe for success, and we are still true to those initial values that started the whole thing.
Right, and I guess you can do that because from what it sounds like, everybody has a day job. Like you work at CodeSandbox, like you said, You're all from various companies, so like you have nothing to gain extra financially from this. That's why it can be entirely community driven.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And we don't no one. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by a great bunch of folks that help with this, because no one has, like you said, like the full-time job, kind of like time to handle all of these things. So when things do get more intense, let's say 2 months before the event, we are able to delegate a lot of the tasks that are needed, right? So one person will handle, ordering t-shirts and socks and merchandise and whatever. Another person will handle stickers. Another person will handle, buying plane tickets for everyone and making sure our rooms are booked and so on at the hotel. So there isn't like a single point of failure that that person needs to be awake 24/7 during the pre-event months, or the event doesn't happen. And that's it's in a way it's a privileged position to be in as organizers, because we don't feel the pressure to have to pay someone like a full-time job salary, because once we do that, we have to make the money to pay that salary, and it just it's a slippery slope towards a kind of like a not a for-profit event, but just an event that needs to make money at all cost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. How has this affected your relationship with sponsor? Like, I know, as I mentioned, a lot of conferences are struggling with sponsorships.
Yeah.
I can actually mention this is so bad. Like, there's a conference. I don't think they'd mind me saying this. React India. They have the worst time with sponsorships because India is pretty unregulated, and so I can say that as an Indian. And it's like companies will commit to sponsor verbally. They'll even like sign contracts in some cases, and just not send the money. And so then they, as an organizer, you can imagine this is a nightmare. You're like surprised, oh my gosh, what happened? I thought and then they just like ghost them. Or the other thing happens, and the sponsors, once they pay, become extremely demanding. We need at least 3 speakers. We need you to put the logo big in front of your own logo, like all kinds of things like that. So that's one thing. But the other thing is some conferences just literally die. So JSCon Budapest, and then we can talk about this more maybe in a few minutes. They died. And they're telling everyone, go to JS Heroes because it's better. So given the transparency here, how has that affected your conversations with sponsors and attendees?
It's a tough topic, to be honest. I don't think that the transparency itself I wouldn't say affects positively or negatively any of these. It's just more about, I feel like I don't think that anyone would mind, even if a for-profit event would be transparent about that. And they can openly say, hey, we make, 100K with 3 events per year, and because we pay our staff out of that, and then we keep 10% for us as organizers, whatever. I don't know how the calculation is done for a for-profit event. But anyone that does that, I think, is just gets. I don't see an angle where this is seen as a bad thing. Of course, unless you're really making a shit ton of money and you're overcharging attendees, that's another story.
Well, yeah, unless your conference has 10,000 people, each ticket is $1,000, and you don't pay your speakers, right? Which is pretty common. So
yeah. Okay, so let's just not go there then. But I would say that the sponsor thing is tough. It's been tough since last year. I think last year, 2023. I mean. We were still kind of living off a bit of from the financial, like from the positive financial aspects of like 2022, when like 2021, since the pandemic, it was there were some good years, I would say, overall in tech. Not good years for the world, but at least the tech world was going pretty well. Now it's 2023 started to go a bit down. We started seeing that sponsors are harder to get. For this year's event, we were fortunate to still have some good relationship with some of our previous sponsors, but organically we didn't really reach to a lot of new sponsors, and that's a concern for next year as well. Again, as transparent as I can be, it is something that we are worried about. And I did talk to a lot of other conference organizers, non-profit and for-profit, and everyone kind of experiences the same thing.
I'm thrilled to announce that the Contagious Code podcast is now sponsored by Wix Studio. Digital marketers, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less when you manage projects on Wix Studio. You can work in sync with your team on one canvas. You can reuse templates, widgets, and sections across your sites. You can create a client kit for seamless handovers. And you can leverage best-in-class SEO defaults across all your Wix sites. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio to see more. There's a link in the show notes. I'm struggling with words here because I don't understand, right, Alex, how at the beginning of our discussion, we said that after or when the pandemic started to loosen up, the restrictions around travel and so on, meetups overpopulated, so there's demand.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the sponsors don't see value in that demand. So I guess I don't understand. Would sponsors not want to get their logos, their people in front of large audiences because there's demand? So why do you think, is it just a lack of money? Like, what's causing this sponsorship problem?
I think it's a bit of an imbalance. Like, I would say companies still have the money to sponsor events. That's not a problem. Like, again, as this is even public, not just for JS Heroes, for a lot of conferences, you see the sponsoring packages when you go to their websites. Sometimes they might be bigger, like if they have like tiered, multi-tier packages, right? And the top tier might feel like a bigger amount. But for a company of 50 plus people or 100 plus people to sponsor something like 3,000 euros, which is our basic package, that's nothing. Like it's literally nothing for them.
It's like a laptop for one employee.
I think that the struggle is internal in the company where especially the marketing departments are getting less funded because everyone tries to keep hold of the money, not spend too much. And the first thing they cut is things like marketing, sponsoring events, sending people to events, learning and development, all these kind of like marketing and HR. So all this internal HR where, you're allocating a certain budget for people to go get trained or go to events or however they want to use that budget. Those are going down. And it's sad because there's no need, I would argue, for those to go down. Especially in times where holding to like making sure that your employees feel valued and they perform their best is more critical maybe than before. So this is what I mean. It's like a bit of a weird situation where sponsors, like companies in general, feel like they're cutting their own route or their own trunk somehow with this move. And that
is so unfortunate. If we continue pulling on this thread of transparency a little bit, I want to understand, you mentioned that 2021, some of that bled into 2022's event and then 2023's event. Is that what happens in case of a big surplus? Is like you just keep this big budget and this starts the conversation for next year's conference?
Yes. Yeah, that's about it. We always, first event, of course, was harder because we were we pushed as much as we could all the invoices to be paid, post event, because we were like the cash flow was not in our favor. Since our second and third event, and now also post pandemic, we always have this kind of we have the money in the bank before a small amount. Of course, doesn't cover all the budget. It's far from covering the budget, of course, and we also don't want to necessarily go into that money because it's kind of like bad days money or something like that, or we're counting on those just to not stress out too much about the the event happening. But we know that when we need to go to that amount, it means that we have to figure out for next year what we can do different to improve this, right? It's not just a safety net that doesn't trigger a response, the next year or something like that.
Yeah. What does it take for the listeners? And of course, all of this is public on the website. We'll put links to the show notes. But I wonder if we could just talk figures for the listeners interested. What does it take on average to run JS Heroes, like for 1 year?
It's around, now it's reached around 100,000 euros. That's the budget needed.
And what's the biggest expense there?
The biggest expense is food and drinks because it's an interesting thing. We run this in the same location since the first edition. You've been to the place. It's like a 5-star hotel. They have all the services on their side. So that's it's a big relief for us that we don't have to worry about catering. We don't have to worry about drinks. We don't have to worry about driving people from the hotel to the venue because it's all there. So moving into another location would be hard. We just have to, we need responsibilities to be shared between the organizers now on all these things that we are really not stressing about. And to answer like the question, then like the big chunk of the money goes to food and drinks, because the arrangement with the hotel is we get the venue for free, and we basically pay for food and drinks for everyone at the venue. So if we have like 500 people at the event, everyone goes to the restaurant, and that comes to like, I don't know, it's probably around 60% of the costs.
Wow.
Or something like that, 50-60%. I have to look at the exact breakdown.
But it seems that pays for itself, because one, the venue is free, and two, the logistic, just the time cost itself of having to organize all of this yourself. Yeah, that's something
that it's invaluable, because you just need to distribute your attention on so many other things, and it's also very convenient, even though still 500 people, it's hard to seat everyone and for everyone to get food at the same time. But you get a seat and you get cooked food in front of you at the conference. I've been to events where the lunch was like a sandwich in a box. So
it's far too common.
Yeah, so it's a cost that we're willing to pay, and we're also, like, just to clarify on the budget. So I said 100,000. That also means that that means that we expect to get 100,000 euros from the tickets plus the sponsors. And that split is kind of like 70% tickets, 30% sponsors, which, again, it's a rough numbers. But at the end of the day, even if the budget is 100,000 or it's 200,000, we price the tickets so that, like, the pricing of the tickets is the last thing we settle on, right? Once we know the budget, we have like a formula in an Excel, and that gives us like the baseline ticket price, right? And then we say, okay, that's the price for 2024, 2025, and so on.
Given that the world of sponsorship is difficult now by companies, I'm curious, since JS Heroes, as we mentioned, is a 365-day-a-year event with various things, one meetup a month, for example, some workshops here and there. Have you considered, this is something I would do personally, I'm not an organizer, but like as an attendee who believes in the conference, I would have done this for JSCon Budapest if they had a monthly meetup, where if you're a member of this meetup, meaning you attend most everyone, and I met people at JS Heroes who do that, like they all know you, that's so cool, 500 people, everyone knows you, and or the most of them, they're like, yeah, Alex, he's a great guy, I go to the meetup. And what I would be willing to do as a regular member of the community is like, give money towards making the event happen, like of my own choice. Like, hey, I earn a salary. I'd like to give you, X% to keep the community, like for community maintenance, and maybe helping fund the next year's event. Is that something that's available to people? Would something like that work to make the conference more sustainable given the sponsor situation?
Yeah, we haven't done that. We talked about it in a way. We talked about it when the sponsor situation wasn't this precarious. So maybe talking about it again for next year might actually might start becoming something. We did also talk about there are all these depending on the country you're in, there are all these things that you can do, like redirecting part of your taxes for nonprofits and so on. We're exploring that as well. The biggest blocker here, honestly, is again time and someone taking ownership of this, right? There usually has to be a lot of paperwork involved when you get money, because everything is organized through an NGO, and the NGO has very strict rules for how they operate, and then they have certain rules that are general in everywhere in the world, but then they have rules in the Romanian jurisdiction. And again, we always choose the path of least resistance when it comes to whether we want to do something or not. And in the past, because we didn't necessarily have the problems with the sponsors, only we noticed that this year for the first time, and it might become a problem for next year. Now it's time to act. Now it's kind of the time to act for that. So maybe if we talk in a year from now, I can give you more insights into this. It sounds like something that could work, but it might also be very hard to
Maintain.
like not necessarily maintain, but there's very much there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Like you cannot really you cannot count on X amount of money coming in every month. Whereas with the tickets and the sponsors, like the calculation just kind of adds up. You can count on the sponsor normally. Let's say 90% of the cases, because we had similar situations where sponsors said yes, we'll do it, and then we never heard from them, or they didn't want to sign the contract in the end, or whatever. We had situations like that. It happens everywhere, unfortunately. But in 90% of the cases, if you get like a verbal agreement, then it will happen, and you can count on those 3,000 euros coming into the calculation and helping your budget get on zero at the end.
Right. Fantastic. So you talked a little bit about the convenience of having this hotel. The convenience meaning it saves you a bunch of time from the difficult stuff of finding a venue and then catering and all of this. And oftentimes the sandwich in the box is probably easier. I have to believe not only is it cheaper, it's also easier, right? But given that you have this partnership with the hotel, all of that takes care of itself. Given that the conference has evolved so much over time, what's like looking across the timeline, what's been some of the most challenging aspects of specifically scaling the conference?
That's an interesting question, because the growth was very natural at first. First 3 editions, we just went from like 350, I think, first edition, then we were 500, then we were 700 people. And
just like that.
Yeah, just like that. Like no, not by doing a bigger effort, just kind of basically counting on the success of the previous edition. The problem was that we then realized that wait, we actually 700 doesn't scream a community event. Doesn't scream like a community event anymore. So then we of course the pandemic happened, and like I don't know, I don't even remember. We were supposed to have an event actually in April 2020, and that was such a painful experience to have to cancel it that I still like regret. Like there were so many amazing people that never made it to Cluj since then, because we were supposed to come in 2020, and we all know what happened then. So I don't remember. I think we were trying to scale back a bit then, like with 600 people, and now we're settled around these 500, 600 people, because that's the number we feel is manageable. So I wouldn't say we have. To better put it, we are looking for growth not in numbers, like not in absolute numbers of attendees and speakers. We're even considering scaling back a bit even the number of speakers, and give more breathing room to the whole event. I was debating with some of my colleagues just a few weeks ago whether people actually find the difference between 16 speakers or 18 speakers just spread throughout 2 days, and whether 16 speakers then gives us more flexibility to organize more, have more time for discussions, networking, and this kind of really core interactions that I personally enjoy the most when I go to events. I don't enjoy them as much when I organize the event, because I have a bunch of other things on my plate, but I hope other people also enjoy those things at least as much as the talks themselves.
This is so interesting. I'm so happy to hear that scaling in this context is more about quality than quantity of attendees and talks. I think, a conference that I've seen, I mentioned this in the episode with Clark Sell, the organizer of that conference, like the best executed conference, or in terms of this type of thing. So not numbers, not sales, not even talks, but the best I don't like the word networking because it sounds a little bit too LinkedIn, but the best networking, the best socializing experience I ever had at a conference is something that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore because the conference died. I'm talking about Agent Conf. And this was such an incredible experience, right? Because like there's 2 days of talks and there's like 6 or maybe 8 talks over the 2 days, or maybe 12, I don't know, something like that. 6 talks per day. And that's 2 days. And then at the end of the second day, we all leave the venue. We get on a big bus. This is the speakers and also attendees who pay like a little extra for like some, I don't know, VIP ticket or something. So we, the speakers and the attendees with the like trip ticket, get on this bus and we go to like a ski lodge somewhere in the Austrian Alps, literally, Alex, in the middle of nowhere. And for the next 2 days, we're all in this big, it feels like a frat house or like a Big Brother house or some place that's like a hacker house, that's somewhere remote. And the point of this is to just hang out in this house, go skiing if you want. There's plenty of ski slopes. But if you're not into skiing, you just sort of hang out in the house. There's table tennis. There's all kinds of things you can do. There's also hacking space. But honestly, the best conference socializing experience of my entire life, hands down, right? Because you had these like really world-class speakers. You had people like Kent C. Dodds and Rick Hanlon from Meta. He works on the React Core team. You had Yanni Evacalio, just a bunch of really great people. And for those who weren't into skiing, we just hang out in the basement where there's table tennis. And it was mostly like the three of us speakers just hanging out and chatting about the future of React and Remix and this and that. And naturally, like a few people who attended the conference just came downstairs and joined the discussion. And it was just so organic. And it was like a 2-day vacation with really cool, like-minded people about like-minded things. It was so special. So all that to say, I love that scaling is not so much in terms of numbers, but you're thinking about similar things, about how can we boost the quality of these interactions. I will also say that the post-conference activity you all do for JS Heroes that I got to be a part of, thank you, is just tremendous, right? Like it was this beautiful thing with a barbecue pit and so on. I'd love to see more of that at conferences.
Yeah. So just 2 points here on the quality thing. One thing I forgot, and I think it's worth mentioning, we are looking at making sure we have as much as we can a diverse pool of attendees at the event, and I'm not just thinking in terms of like gender diversity or race or anything like that. It's more like diverse as in from how many places in the world, from how many, more like cultural diversity, so to say. Because of course you cannot enforce this on for the attendees, right? And it has to be fair for everyone that wants to, come to the conference and pay the ticket. We do have like diversity tickets, but that's a separate thing. But just in terms of like going to communities, making partnerships with our communities, mostly from Europe, where it's easier to get to Romania with a one flight or something like that, and make sure that we get some people that are coming from those countries as well at the event. And that for me has been like a very interesting thing to see, and very positive. It's a very positive experience to see tickets being sold in like Sweden and Germany, and then the Netherlands, and then Spain, and then also nearby countries like Serbia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and so on. And this has been steadily growing. I don't want this to become like a replacement factor, so that the local community still is the majority of the audience, but having access to more of a diverse group of people from different places that have come with different experiences and share those experiences. That's a great vector for growth, if you ask me. And then on the post-event thing, I would encourage everyone that organizes any kind of event to do any kind of activity in the day after the event. I'm not sure if it's possible for everyone. We specifically run things on a Thursday and a Friday so that we have Saturday the day after. For me, that's my favorite day of the whole week, because I get to fully relax. I get to meet I get to interact with the speakers in a very non-conference context, and it's lovely to be able to talk technical stuff. And people always think that at this speaker dinners or speaker events after the conference, people always think that speakers are just geeking out about technology. Most of the times, I would say 80% of the times, we talk about anything but technology, and that for me is the favorite thing. I get to meet the human behind the person on stage, and that's a very valuable experience, and that's what gives me the energy for next years and for the next events as well.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. For anyone who's met me around conferences at informal events like this, they'll tell you I'm a somewhat different person behind the podcast mic than in person after a conference. It lends itself well to just talking nonsense and joking around a little bit too much, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I really love how you see, you have a group of 20 speakers plus 20 organizers, volunteers. That's for us, for at JS Heroes, that's the kind of the size of the group we have on the Saturday after the event. And in the past, we even went on hiking trips, or we went on different places. So we did different activities across the years. What I see every time is that people coming, they meet there's this kind of different groups. Some speakers know other speakers, some speakers don't know other people in the group. At the end of the day, it feels like it's gonna sound a bit mushy, but it's like a complete graph of everyone kind of interacting with everyone freely, like without any forced networking activity or anything like that. It just happens naturally.
Yeah, and it's really magical. And this is what I think makes a lot of conferences super special. About the diversity with attendees, I think this is also, Alex, you and your team put so much thought into optimizing the conference experience. I'm so thankful you're on this podcast sharing this with people, because look, I've spoken at conferences since I'd say 2017, 2016, something like that. So 8 years now, and this is the first time I hear somebody talk about diversity of attendance. Usually very little thought is given to that, because it's like, okay, as long as they buy a ticket, who cares, right? Unfortunately, but that's just the business, evil, capitalist, whatever side of it. I love that. How are you all like enforcing or keeping track of that? Like making sure that there's cultural diversity in that. Do you have a wait list where you select like who gets to buy a ticket based on geography? And is that some percentage of tickets you sell versus locals?
No, not necessarily. Like I said, I don't want us to be like, I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have a chance to buy the ticket, right? So all the tickets are up for grabs for everyone. What we would do is go to communities around the world and do partnerships where we share like discount links for their community members, right? And I don't care if that community goes on and shares that link to the whole internet, just broadcasts it wherever, because from experience, you get maybe 10, 15 tickets sold through the discount links, but that's still a good pool. I know that at least some of the people maybe wouldn't even have heard about the conference if we wouldn't have done that partnership with that community. So we do this. We try to look at places where it's very convenient to also get to Cluj. We're a small city, and I doubt that people will switch 3 planes to go and attend the conference, right? For speakers, it's a different thing, because we have a whole different motivation to come. But as an attendee, you will first look for events where you can easily hop on a plane and get there, or just go drive for 5-6 hours from your neighbor country and so on. So we try to look at that, and maybe we do some targeted advertising on like social media, but that sadly didn't really work in the past few years. It feels like that's kind of a dead end for now. So yeah, we're left with communities, and we're fortunate to have a bunch of these community other community partner communities that are sending these, that are sharing about our event and helping us get more people.
Fantastic. So as we established, diversity and inclusion is so paramount to the success of JS Heroes, both from attendees and speakers. I was on the speaker selection committee for JSConf Budapest, RIP, but their process was so great. In fact, this is how I actually started as a speaker, was through the same JSConf process at JSConf EU, which was the first tech conference I ever spoke at, which is fully anonymous, right? So like all you see on the selection committee is the title and the abstract. You do not see anything that can identify the speaker. And so you just go based off of ideas. And then at some point you create a short list, and that list becomes shorter and shorter and shorter until you have, like, I don't know, 12, 18 per track. And then it gets de-anonymized, and then they start looking at, okay, who is this? And this is necessary because sometimes speakers will submit like 3 proposals, but it's the same speaker. And so you could literally have, like, in your initial agenda 3 talks by the same person, and so you de-anonymize it, you see, okay, who's the people, and then you adjust for diversity, inclusion, and more. Is that process similar to the JS Heroes speakers selection process? What does that look like? And how do you encourage and enforce diversity and inclusion at that level?
Yeah, it is similar. And I can talk about that. I just want to say that it's very hard to aim for a diverse pool of speakers if the selection committee itself is not I wouldn't say the selection committee needs to be diverse in that sense. They need to have the mindset of diversity, right? They need to think, like, in their mind, right? When they think about, okay, what kind of speakers we want to have, and you think about 10 names, if those 10 names are 10 white male speakers, then that's not a good mindset for
Right.
for a person in the committee. And we're fortunate. I'm fortunate that I work with a bunch of people that have a very good mindset from that perspective, and they will usually try to. We don't go necessarily for the quote unquote famous people only when we select. Like, let me backtrack. Right, we let's say we want to select 20 speakers or 18 or whatever we want for a specific edition. We would usually go and have this process that starts right about now in the year. So the conference is happening in May. So around early summer, we start drafting out which names we want to get for next edition, right? And we come up with a list of maybe 20, maybe 30 people. We start voting on that. We start debating on how would they fit what we want for 2025 and so on. And then we start sending some invitations for those speakers. But we stop when we get to 50% of the agenda, right? So, like, if we want 20 speakers, we invite 10, or we stop when we have 10 people accepting the invitation, because that's another side. You can get a reply where, like, they cannot do it, or they don't want to, or you just don't get a reply, or whatever you get. So you need to be persistent with that process as well. By the way, that's just a fun fact. Don't expect that if the conference is well known, you will get 10 out of 10 people accepting an invitation. And then for the CFP, we start the process. We run it for 2 months, and then we do a 2-stage evaluation. The first one is anonymous. We get usually around 300 to 400 proposals. We go through it's a complete anonymous thing. You just see, like you said, like the title, the abstract, the description. You do like a voting thing, like a star system rating, and then we establish a certain threshold. Everything above that threshold is considered the next stage, and then we de-anonymize and we start looking at the speakers that we already have invited. What are they talking about? What topics are they covering? What are the missing pieces? And then we try to fill the story, coming back to the story that we talked about earlier. We try to fill that from the CFP. And what I noticed very interesting, and specifically on the diversity point, is that the fact that we de-anonymize the results at that point doesn't introduce any bias at that stage. I mean, I wouldn't say that we can do this full selection fully anonymized, but even if we will do it fully anonymized, it will still be like 80% the same. What happens after the de-anonymizing phase is just that we try to prioritize based on budgetary constraints. For example, let's not have 10 out of 10 people we select coming from outside of Europe, because that will be just a huge cost of flying everyone in when we already have a bunch of other people that maybe submitted similar talks. They're just like 0.1% below in the average markings, and we will prioritize someone, let's say, from a closer location or something like that. Or we maybe someone vouches for one of that's when you can get a bit of bias in, but it's, in my mind, it's still positive bias, because at the end of the day, you still want to count, you still need to you're responsible, so to say, for the people that you select, right? And for the people that you put in front of the audience. And you want a certain degree of, certainty that those people will be able to deliver the talk, will be able to hit those points that they said they want to talk about, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so encouraging. I think one really profound thing you said here is something worth repeating, which is diversity and inclusion is a mindset first, and it has to be the mindset of the people selecting the talks. And not just a mindset, but also it needs to be seen by the selection committee as something valid and valuable. There's a lot of people I know, and this is not to disparage anybody, but there's a lot of people I know who just genuinely believe that homogeny is great. We don't need diversity. Who believe that the best speakers are men, who they have these views, and they're allowed to have whatever view they want. But I think there's danger in putting these people in charge of speaker selection, or being even part of a committee, because that then leads to echo chambers, and we've all seen with January 6th, 2023, what that stuff can lead to.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And the thing with the mindset is that it's what the how should I put it? The fact that you have the mindset on you're not actively thinking about, oh my God, I have to have a diverse pool of people here.
Right.
The mindset is kind of like it's something that it's almost like the process is running in your brain. It's part of your way of thinking. So you're not forcing yourself to think about, oh, let me I added 5 names here. Let me add also a woman or a person of color, or let me do that diversity token, which is not the right way to do diversity, right? In the end.
Yeah, it's I think a great analogy is, it's sort of at least this is an analogy that tracks with me. It probably doesn't with most listeners, because they're probably healthier than I am. But when I want a cold drink on a summer day, it's very hot, as you mentioned. I just know I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to pick something that has no sugar. I'll probably pick a Coke Zero if it's early in the day and caffeine is okay, right? And it's like you said, it's this background process. I'm thirsty. I need something cold. I'm just going to go grocery store, get it. I'm not thinking, I have to get this specific thing because hydration is important and I need to, I'm not putting overt effort into it. It's just a core belief of mine that sugar is poison. And that I still need some hydration, but I want it to be fun and not just as boring as water. Maybe it's a bad analogy, but I kind of see what you mean. It has to be a subconscious recognition of unconscious bias,
exactly.
And then making that conscious. Alex, I'm so pleasantly surprised to hear that this is such a priority. Given that the conference is in Romania. Early in my career, I had such a horrible experience with this, with Romanian colleagues of mine who bullied me for the color of my skin. And this was my impression of Romania from the beginning. I was like, oh, they're just a bunch of racists. Because the guy even told me, he was from a small village near Timișoara, and he was like, look, man, your skin color, if people in the mountains see you, they'll actually think you're the devil. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should stay away from that. And so this was sort of my belief. And so to hear, you from this country that I associated with some small trauma, it's just very encouraging.
I don't want to excuse any of this behavior because I know it's here. It's very pregnant. The problem and I don't think it's just a problem in Romania. It is specifically maybe more of a problem in Romania because of our background of pretty much a racist country, and the last country in Europe that abolished slavery. So that can tell you something about this. But the problem with when you bring on diversity and again the tech industry, you can say is the most progressive segment of the society here, right? So, and even in the most progressive segment, you would still have a lot of voices that are against this wave of encouraging diversity and basically giving equal rights to everyone. They don't accept that as a requirement for the society to thrive. And the problem is that they see, and what I found across, like what I noticed is that when you talk to people, when you explain why this is important, they understand. When they don't understand is when they see any kind of minority or people for any kind of underprivileged group kind of voicing their concerns in an I wouldn't call it aggressive way, but they perceive it as an aggressive way, right? People asking their basic rights, which is totally makes sense. But then people especially in Eastern European countries will be like, hey, but I'm not, why are you telling me that I'm privileged as a white male here? Because, we've lived in poor conditions. We have been poor countries. And that is the fact. That is the reality, right? A lot of people don't understand privilege the same way as people in Western Europe understand it, because a lot of the countries have come from a place of, extreme poverty in the, 50s, 60s, and so on. So it's a perception gap, and it's also a gap that can be bridged, but with very honest conversation, not with just campaigning and messages and activism. You need honest conversations to bridge this culture, to bridge this cultural gap.
Yeah, honest conversation and also respectful conversation that requires a lot of prefrontal control, meaning you can't allow yourself to become like emotionally volatile in such, which is the temptation to do so, right? Because it feels like such a fundamental wronging of one's identity. But I strongly relate to the points you mentioned about Eastern Europe being, the famines in Ukraine, like 50, 60 years ago, unbelievable. People literally eating each other and so on. And I can fully understand the response with how do you call that privilege? But I guess privilege is also a matter of perception. Like what I mean is, so I grew up in Qatar, for those who listen, and in Qatar, they don't care if you're from Eastern Europe or Western Europe. If your skin is white, you get the promotion, period. And so even though you don't come from a privileged background, the perception of, this person has light skin, therefore they're an angel, let's bless them, is unfortunately pretty common. And I think that's sort of a testament to that. However, I've also heard here in Germany, I've heard people really, they're not against the ideas, as you mentioned, but they're against the ceremony of it. So I've heard homophobes here in Germany talk about why do they have to make pride such a big deal and broadcast it so boldly. I'm not, I don't mind them, but this whole ceremony is bothering me. So all that to say, I sort of understand where these people are coming from when they say, look, I don't have a problem with the ideas. I have a problem with the aggressiveness of pushing this idea onto me I think for them, they just don't understand that this is actually important, because otherwise the echo chamber gets reinforced, right?
Yeah. And I actually have a very interesting story on this. I don't remember which edition it was. I think it was pre-pandemic, probably in 2019. We had the first day of JS Heroes. We had first day, first segment, 5 speakers before lunch. All of them were female, and we didn't realize that until someone tweeted at the last talk was oh my, there was another female attendee tweeting they feel so pleasantly surprised to see so many wonderful females on stage, and thank you for the conference organizer for doing this. And we're oh, this wasn't even necessarily planned like that, or wasn't the idea of showcasing it in a certain way. We never go on stage and say, this year we have people from X amount of cultures, from different races, different genders, different sexual orientations. We always we are very silent about this. broadcasting this, but we make sure that the actual that the diversity is there, and then we would rather wait for the audience to notice that, or just in a way make that feel. It's a matter of how we talk, what we talked about earlier. It's a matter of the subconscious. Like you don't have to be constantly reminded that a speaker is not necessarily a male speaker, a male white speaker, right? The fact that you see speakers that are not white and not males is just subconsciously giving you the idea that the speaker can be anyone on stage.
Totally. And I love, this is also, I've often lived this way where instead of boasting about things that you're proud of, you just live your life and let people recognize it for themselves. And if they don't, then it's probably you're not as cool as you think you are, you know? In the beginning of our discussion, Alex, you identified as a software engineer, and you said me and my entire team were all software engineers, and we had just so happened to organize a conference. So you are a software engineer at CodeSandbox, which is a great tool. I use it. Fun fact, I actually met Ives, the founder, at a conference when he was 17 years old in 2017. He was born in 2000. Unbelievable.
I also met him at JS Heroes, by the way.
Whoa! And then he hired you because of your great conference. No, I'm joking, of course. It's but that's so cool. Yeah, and I met him, and he was this kid. He was this child who was like, "Yeah, I have a company called CodeSandbox." He actually sounded like that. And to watch the trajectory of this company is so tremendous. Anyway, without digressing too much, you're an engineer. But also you organize this thing that is like 365 days a year, sort of similar to me, right? I'm a developer relations engineer, but I also run a podcast that ships, twice a week. So 104 episodes a year, whatever. In any case, how do you balance these roles? It seems like it would require a lot of balancing, especially around the conference.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And it's a reality where, I'm fortunate to have the kind of flexibility in my day job to be able to tell my colleagues that, hey, this week I'm taking the whole week off because it's a conference, and I'm spending the first days of the week prepping, and then the second part of the week is the conference itself. I think I was always kind of fortunate from that perspective. But everywhere I worked since 2017, people kind of accepted the fact that, sometimes on a Monday, for example, I'm off at exactly 6 p.m., which is 5 p.m. for Central European time, because we have the weekly organizer meeting, right? So that's something that I try to balance as much as I can, without, of course, affecting the day job. And I think everyone in the team does it similarly. Like they will tell us, and we have a very open policy on this. Like you commit to doing something, that's fine. If you say, sorry, I'm going to have a rough period at work, we're releasing something in February, so I'm going to be off for 2 months, I can't help you with anything, we just tell to that person, okay, just whenever you feel you can come back, the door is open. We will find something for you to take care of at that point. It cannot, like, that's the thing, that's the reality about organizing something in a non-profit fashion. It will never have the first priority for everyone, and it cannot have it, right? And it's just the way it is.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a real balance here, like an actual balance where you have this thing that funds your ability to run the conference, and you have the conference that is this life-giving thing for your community, and orchestrating them in such a way that you can do both sounds like no easy task. But it sounds like really a lot of it is attributed to CodeSandbox and the working culture and style, where it's as understanding. And so I have to speculate a bit. If you had a different job at maybe a more demanding place, the conference may have a much harder time.
Yeah, that's totally true. And of course, not everyone in the team, and I'm from my perspective, that is 100% true. It might not be 100% true for everyone in the team, because the way we work, the way in which work is that we delegate ownership, not just responsibility in the team, right? So like if someone is, handling badges, for example, they would own the whole process from making sure that someone that helps on the design side can provide for those badges. They have the design. Then they talk to various print shops. They bring back some sort of samples of how they would look like. We all give like a check to that, and then the badges are printed. Or just a silly example, for example. But there's no expectation that anyone else will ask, hey, how are the badges going? Or how's the how's the other process running?
Right. That is so cool. I have so much more respect now for CodeSandbox because of it. Okay, we're about to start wrapping up, but I want to ask you a question that I've asked everyone who's started something on this founder season of the podcast, which is, and this comes out of a conversation I had with some founders early this year or last year, where we sort of identified that there isn't like a living standard for people who start things, right? There's like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They have like these documents that say an image is an image. This is what you can expect. And with JavaScript, like these are the coercion rules. This is how scoping works, etc. With being a founder, there's nothing to prepare you for what to expect. And I thought it would be cool if there was maybe like a document of this, like just so that the future generations know, like this is something you're going to have to deal with. You maybe don't have it on your horizon, but it's coming. If there was such a document, a living standard for founders to reference, what would you add to that given your experience founding JS Hero?
That's a very good question. I'm talking about a lot about this, and like the whole experience of doing JS Heroes and being part of. I never see myself as the founder. Maybe I introduce myself as the founder sometimes, but I don't see myself as a founder, but rather just as one of the organizers. And I think, and as a side note, I am visible because I usually go up on stage and like I introduce the event, and then I'm the person that kind of communicates with most of the speakers and so on. So kind of like I'm in the middle of it all. But so coming back to the founder thing, I feel very fortunate that I'm surrounded by people of great quality, and I think that would be one advice. You can be a solo founder, you can run something by yourself, but if you want to scale that quantity or quality, you need to surround yourself with people that are of good quality, and they don't need to be as passionate about the conference and the idea as you are, but they need to be at least they need to absorb your passion, so to say, right? That's something that you can't really expect everyone in like a team of 20 people to have the same dedication or the same passion for the event itself. But when I look at the team at the end of one conference, like 1 year of an event, I see the satisfaction on everyone, not just on the core team, so to say, or the main people behind the conference.
How do you identify, selecting people of quality is key. I love that you mentioned, by the way, the passion from you can't be expected from everybody else, but your passion ought to be, ought to be contagious so that they catch it. I think that's very cool. But how do you identify that? How do you look at your team, your potential team, and go like, these are quality people? What does that mean? What does quality mean in this context? Is it reliability? Like if they say I'm going to do badges, then badges get done. Is it more excitability? Yeah. What is quality?
Yeah, it's never. I don't think it's never like one thing you can put your finger on, say, oh, this is the exact, this is the vector that determines the quality of the person. I think this is where the advantage of the nonprofit comes into place, right? Because the fact that someone volunteers is already like a first threshold, right? You eliminate like, yeah, you just eliminate anyone that doesn't necessarily understand or doesn't resonate with the values of the non-profit event, and you get people that are willing to give their personal free time to do something that they don't get anything particularly out of it. After that, it's probably reliability is a great kind of, again, argument for this, because you can, if you have to, and this is something that my colleague Alexandra, who's kind of like the brain of the whole logistics and like the whole management
awesome.
side of the organization, she always tells me that she doesn't want to be the project manager for people, like doesn't want to go to everyone and say, hey, have you done this, have you done this, have you done that, because then people will start associating this with work, and that's the last thing we want to do. So that's why, coming back, reliability is important, because and again, this idea of delegating ownership, not just responsibility, because then people will come and report back on things, saying, hey, I did this, let's meet up and discuss the next steps, rather than the information being pulled from them.
Right. How do you meet people like Alexandra? Like, would you just pull out a call for organizers, call for volunteers, and people fill out a form?
Yeah, there isn't a formal process, of course. We the team fluctuated a lot over the years, shrank a bit, of course, during the pandemic, and then we did like a call for volunteers. We had 2 waves of call for volunteers in the past few years, and what was nice is that the first wave was kind of like we just needed more people to join the team. We have kind of like the core team, let's say 10 people, that meet up from October to May when the conference is happening. And then we have, during the event and in the week of the event, we have another batch of volunteers and people from the community that we know, they're busy throughout the year, but they are there at the conference, and they help with different things at the conference. And what was a very great surprise for us is when we did a call for volunteers for that week of the event back in 2023, I think 4 out of 5 volunteers remained part of the core team for the next year, because they really enjoyed, like they enjoyed working with us, and we really liked the way they helped at the event and the way they took responsibility for all their work.
That is so cool. All right, last question, Alex, and then I'll let you go. Which is, JS Heroes has been going for many years. It's been working well, at least from what I can see. There are some challenges with sponsorship and so on. If we cast vision to the future, 2025 and beyond, what are some long-term goals you're thinking about with JS Heroes? Is it maybe centered around sustainability, or how do you see the conference evolving, especially in regarding changes to the industry and also the needs of the JavaScript community?
Yeah. I have this kind of thing that I'm pushing every year, and I'm pushing for it more as we grow as a community. And I'm not talking about the JS Heroes community, I'm talking about like the tech community. I started out in 2010 when tech seemed like this, very positive thing, like we're doing good for the world, we're changing things into the better and so on. And now it's kind of becoming this kind of antagonist in the story, right? Where whenever you read about tech, you don't really read positive news anymore. So my idea is that, and I think a lot of people in the community also resonate with this, we want to make sure that the conference and the activity around the community kind of is at least one step ahead of the industry in terms of like maturity of topics that we talk about, right? So we had every time we do a conference, but everyone, if you ask the audience, they will want the technical talks, they will want the framework oriented talks. We try to bring them different topics that are related to, I don't know, maybe mental health and balance, ethical concerns. We pushed a lot of accessibility around the years, so trying to kind of get more and more mature as a community so that everyone kind of understands that tech is a tool, right? The frameworks are cool, the standards, the coding, the thing you're doing on a daily basis is great, but you also have a responsibility, and there are also consequences to your work, and how are you dealing with that, and how are you getting from that place of, oh, it's just a job, I go, I code, I go home, and I mind my own business, to you are part of a greater thing, and you have a bigger impact on you can have a bigger impact on things.
That is so cool. I love that it ties in so nicely to the name of the conference, JS Heroes, especially as you mentioned, like tech used to feel like this, and I fully agree, it used to feel like this heroic thing, like, hey, we're adding value to the world, we're building things that are changing lives, to now it's sort of become a villain. You said antagonist, but really big tech, especially big tech, feels like a villain with the whole, Microsoft Recall, this feature which literally will spy on your device. Sure, it's on device, but there's a shadiness to tech today. And I love that you call it out, and it's something that you're sensitive to, and it's something that you're hoping to be ahead of in terms of organizing the conference. That is tremendous. With that, I think it's the perfect note to leave it there. So Alex, I just what an incredible discussion, from the origin story of JS Heroes to the sustainability initiatives, the whole nonprofit, and the topic of diversity and inclusion. Tremendous. I want to, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for sharing these insights with us.
Thank you for having me, and it was a great conversation. And I'm glad we got into such an interesting array of topics. I did not imagine we would go this way, but definitely it was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining my discussion with Alex Moldovan. I hope you learned a ton about what it takes to organize a conference about JavaScript, but not just organize a conference about JavaScript, organize one that is so fully transparent, diverse, and welcoming. I hope you have interest to either attend, sponsor, or even speak at JS Heroes. And if you do, all the information you need is at jsheroes.io. I'm also an ambassador for JS Heroes, so if you need anything at all, just email me. You'll find my contact information on tej.as. Thanks for sticking around. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, I'd invite you to leave up to a 5-star review reflecting your experience with the podcast. If you're listening on and watching on YouTube, then if you subscribe to the channel, like the video, that would be a huge help and really a no-effort way to support the podcast. If there's guests you want me to talk to, or content you want me to cover, topics, etc., leave a comment on YouTube. I do make a point to read all of them and support you in that way. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering.